Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail C. Martin, and tonight we are talking about Henry Winchester and the Men of Letters, doing a little headcanon here because the show gave us some tantalizing glimpses and hints, but there was an awful lot that they left unspoken and left up to us in all these years since to figure out as we please. But before we get into that, let's let our wonderful panelist tonight introduce herself. Elektra.
I'm Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer and an editor. I specialize in alternate history, but frankly, I will write anything that I can get paid to write. I've been watching Supernatural since that very first episode aired until that last episode just made me cry.
And I'm Gail C. Martin, and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all my modern day worlds are ones Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. I fell in love with the show halfway through season 11, binge watched 11 seasons in time for the start of season 12, fell down the rabbit hole, and haven't seen the light of day since. Actually, haven't looked for the light of day either. So we know that John Winchester, the boy's father, Sam and Dean's father, grew up thinking his father, Henry, had abandoned him and his mother. We find out later, Sam and Dean find out, that Abaddon actually threw Henry through a rift into the future. And so he didn't voluntarily abandon his family.
No,
And then
he ran away from Abaddon into a rift in the future.
you're right. But he didn't intentionally abandon his family. He just had no way home. And then when the boys meet him, they can't send him back in time because even if they could pull that off, it would change the entire timeline. Not like they didn't do that a few times, but so that really leaves you to wonder, what did Henry do in the years that he was displaced? He was a man of letters.
He didn't survive. He didn't survive.
Well, he had to have, because Sam and Dean met him.
Well, okay. When he was displaced, he was running from Abaddon.
Mm-hmm.
And he ran into the future.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, episode, I can't remember what it was called, where he ran and did the magic spell, and he showed up in their motel room, and he was their buddy, and Abaddon followed him, and they fought Abaddon together, and Henry sacrificed himself to get close enough so they could kill they couldn't kill Abaddon. They cut her into bits. Am I conflating two episodes?
No. So he died in 2013 after traveling to the future via time travel spell. So I guess he really didn't end up having, I guess we have a short amount of headcanon. I was thinking that there was more time there. He was in As Time Goes By, season 8, episode 12.
Right. That's the one I was thinking of. Sorry.
Yeah, he means to find help from John against Abaddon, but he ends up finding Sam and Dean because by this time John is dead. So that's that's interesting, because I was thinking he had been thrown into the future and kind of had time to kill. So what would a displaced man of letters do? But as it turns out, I guess he pretty much just got deposited in 2013 in time to meet everybody and then die fighting Abaddon.
He showed us a lot of cool things while he was there, though.
Mhm.
Mean, when he got away from the guys, he of course snatched their ride because it was the one that looked most familiar to him,
Mhm.
grabs the Impala and dashes off to a supply store where someone was selling herbs and things, and goes to grab the right things he would need to do the bud signal again so he could get back to his own time as the boys are chasing him. And we get to find out about those sorts of things.
Mhm.
And eventually they get to talking to one another, and we get to see his point of view where computers are room sized.
Mhm.
That laptop can't be a computer, it's not large enough. And he takes them back into what is now a comic shop and used to be the Men of Letters meeting room. And we get to see how, one of their ancestors was doing magic spells, which we're not used to the boys doing or knowing about.
Mhm.
So there was that whole all of this stuff we had no idea about. Spells were things that witches did, and witches equal bad at
Mhm.
this point. So there's all sorts of cool stuff. And we don't find out what happened to Josie and a whole lot of other stuff until a much later episode, um where they show us all the cool stuff that happened at the monastery, where the nuns were when Josie is possessed, where Henry and Josie went on a mission for the Men of Letters as part of their training, and Josie got possessed by Abaddon.
Mhm.
um where was that? I had that written down somewhere. um Mother's Little Helper in season 9.
Oh, yeah. It's yeah, because Henry used the time travel spell to escape Josie, who was possessed by Abaddon and had kind of slaughtered the rest of the Men of Letters. The Winchesters have the most bizarre way of having family reunions.
Well, the callbacks to the episodes and to Henry were so cool, because Henry's the one that showed them how to carve the devil's trap
Mhm.
onto a bullet.
Mhm.
And that was how he trapped Abaddon, was with a bullet that had the devil's trap carved into it. And they used that later
Mhm.
when
Guys.
Abaddon shot Crowley with one. And she credited it to Henry,
Mhm.
which I thought was so super cool. And then it all comes full circle in Lebanon in season 14, where Dean and Sam explain to their father what happened to his dad and how he hadn't really been abandoned,
Mhm.
which isn't super helpful because he didn't really remember it, but for a few moments he knew.
Yeah. And that was a nice touch. I mean, like you said, even if he didn't remember it because he woke up thinking that he'd had this really crazy dream, but they had the chance to fix something at least a little bit. And who knows, maybe what he retained was some maybe less resentment against his dad for running out on them, maybe a little more forgiveness, even if he didn't consciously remember why. Um, which, never hurts.
It's just another piece of why Lebanon is one of the best episodes of
Mhm.
the entire series. There are so many wonderful little pieces and chinks and fill in and explanations in there that build them as a family unit, and you wonder just what would have happened if the family have held together.
Well, and if Henry hadn't been thrown into the future, it's very likely that John would have become a man of letters instead of a hunter. The whole reason for him, he would have been initiated by his father, and they may have even been able to prevent Mary's death, which was what led him into being a hunter. So kind of changes the whole potential timeline there.
Well, would he have met Mary? Would he have gone to war? The what ifs are insane. You,
Mm-hmm.
you do wonder if the Winchesters, the TV series, would have had more of a family unit together,
Mm-hmm.
where at least John's mom was still around, and John and Mary seemed intent on having a life together where maybe they weren't both hunters, but she was still around.
Mm-hmm.
I feel certain in that world that she doesn't give up so easily.
Mm-hmm.
Although I think that might be the rich Chesters.
Mm-hmm.
And she may well be you know, making dinner while taking the odd hunting job just for fun.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're making the money. We still don't know. I really wish we'd gotten a few more seasons of that.
Oh yeah. Well, and if so, since we know that Mary came from a hunter family with the Campbells, um, John, if John had been a man of letters, they may have seen each other as, if not enemies, there was certainly friction between the men of letters and hunters. The men of letters thought they were superior, and the hunters, if they were even aware of the men of letters, would have dismissed them as snobs.
Well, the men of letters sent out assignments to particular hunters. So maybe there would have been a relationship there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the Campbells were some of the hunters they worked with. We don't know. We certainly know that the Winchester family really took to the men of letters stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Campbell blood there, they could go either way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved the glimpse we got of Henry. I would have liked to have seen more, but how they would have worked that in, who knows? But it certainly created some room for thought, and you know what might have changed if he hadn't disappeared.
Did we ever find out what Henry's day job was?
Not that I know of.
I mean, he was always dressed so nice. So I'm guessing and we found out later that it was mom who was the mechanic and ran the garage.
Mm-hmm.
So was Henry like an accountant or something? He seemed to really like the magic and spells and precision, and maybe he had desk job of some kind, or maybe he was a lawyer.
Well, I've always thought that accountants and accounting was a arcane form of magic, especially
How
every
else
time I
do you
try to
balance a checkbook?
especially every time I try to do my taxes. Um, so yeah, I can see that precision, or a lawyer, um, because there's a with both professions there's a certain sequence in which things have to be done, and if you leave out a component, bad things happen.
Well, or here's a thought. I have a friend who's an actuary
Mm-hmm.
who's also into theater. And the way he expressed it was, I can work regular hours. No one ever asks me to stay late. And that means I can have as much time as I want for my theater pursuits. It's great pay. There's always work. So maybe he was doing something like that because, well, he was a man of letters and they travel. He has assignments. They meet late at night and do magic. He needed a steady 9 to 5 job that didn't want him to stay late.
Mm-hmm. And that would have been a totally above board kind of job. The the local neighborhood would have seen it and approved. He would have been unremarkable. Um, So nobody would have been expecting him to be doing all this other stuff on the side.
Something that paid well, and everybody would have thought it was boring and didn't ask him about it.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's a very good thought. So, in one of the only other glimpses we really get of other chapter houses, they occasionally mention that there are chapter houses all over the United States, and we know that they're also in the UK, at least, maybe elsewhere. Why wouldn't they be elsewhere?
And the same
Um,
key opens all of them, which
yeah,
seemed like a good idea at the time.
yeah, the same person who came up with their computer password is 1234566. There's a flaw in this logic. Um, but the only other time I think we actually see members from another chapter house is in The Thing, which is where we get the um, tentacle monster from through another rift. That it turns out they are uh, keeping the monster restrained until Sam and Dean bungle into it and don't realize that it's the pretty lady is actually this monster from beyond. Dean almost gets tentacled, and it's sort of like Goose in the Miss Marvel, you know, basic large flurkin uh, without the cat. Um, but those men of letters went around in robes with hoods, seemed very mystical, um, where we didn't really pick that up so much from what glimpses we got of the other men of letters. These were American too. Thoughts on that?
They seem to be, it was a chapter house that the watching over the creature that was being held in place by the Seal of Solomon
Mm-hmm.
was something that had been passed down from family member to family member to family member. There were like it was a family grouping, I think, that was watching over it and making sure that nobody messed with the chapter house because there's a monster there. And they at least knew that the monster looked like a person and you shouldn't mess with her. And I think the robes and stuff were something that they adopted because they weren't really men of letters. They were just the people who watched the chapter house. Their ancestors had been the men of letters who did the stupid and called up a monster out of Lovecraft. That was a very Lovecraftian thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
We've run into Lovecraft in Supernatural before. They called in a tentacled monster from another dimension and didn't find a way to send it back.
And did we ever find out why they called up the tentacled monster? Were they trying to harness it, use it as a weapon? Those things never end well.
Well, all the people that were involved in sucking it into our dimension met bad ends.
Got flurkened.
They got flurkened, yes.
Well, and that.
Flurkins are on our side, but
Mhm.
this particular one was not.
No, no. Um, and it's interesting. We see that all happening in presumably the 1920s because she's in a flapper dress, and so these guardians have been watching over this monster and preserving the magic to restrain it since they don't seem to be able to work the magic in reverse to send it back. And I guess she's part of a pair, and her mate wants to come through over here rather than take her back.
I don't know if they've thought that part through. I think they just want to be together. And it's just well, yeah, we're just getting together. We don't care where.
Well, maybe they ate everybody in the other dimension.
Maybe. Um, but as many, mages do, they had a problem and they threw a band-aid on it in the form of the Seal of Solomon. and nobody was around that could figure out how to fix the problem. So they just closed up the chapter house and said, "Don't go here."
Which is interesting because if the men of letters with all these chapter houses were a working network, aside from just hubris and not wanting to admit they made a mistake, hey, we have a monster in the attic. You guys know how to deal with this? It would seem if they had contact of any regular type with the other chapter houses, even pre-internet, you'd think that would be the first place you'd turn is, you guys ever see anything like this? You know how to send it back?
They don't talk a lot about how the men of letters died out, but you wonder how many they lost during the war,
Mm-hmm.
because that was in the 20s. And then, you know, 20 years later, they ended up with, well, 20s would be the end of World War One.
Mm.
And you
Yeah.
wonder how many men of letters got drafted. World War One, and then 20 years later, World War Two.
Or we're doing magical supernatural things to try to avert war or as espionage in that run up to World War II and got killed doing it.
I mean, we know that they were active during World War Two because there was the woman who was a member of one of the European groups
Mm-hmm.
on that submarine.
Mm-hmm. Dauphine.
Yeah. And who had the hand of God, which only had one shot. Boy, I wish we'd known more about all of those groups, the European groups.
Mm-hmm. They didn't seem to have much luck with reusable magic.
It was just too powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It was like Superman. It's very hard to write magic that powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, we'll just use the hand of God on it. Okay, well, that's the first 5 minutes of the episode. We solved the problem. What do we do for the rest of it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you have to find a reason for it to not be available. Better it's burned out.
Mm-hmm.
Storytelling issues.
I would have loved to have seen Sam and Dean do a road trip looking up other chapter houses of the men of letters, especially as things got dire. Okay, were they really all dead? Did they really completely die out? What kind of stuff might have been left in those chapter houses that could have been useful? Because there were times when they just scoured high and low because they were up against something big. Well, go look in the chapter houses.
With a panel truck,
Mm-hmm.
emptying out the magical items, any books that seemed reasonable to take with them.
Mm-hmm.
I love that Impala, but there just wasn't any place to take stuff.
No, but it had a powerful enough engine, it could have pulled a U-Haul, much to Dean's horror.
Yeah, could you see him letting them use?
No. But when you say panel truck, all I can think of is that last scene in Indiana Jones where they're moving that big box with the Ark of the Covenant into the
Yes, the
government
ark's
warehouse.
in a warehouse, and they're just
Ensures it will
hiding it
never be
among
found.
all the other stuff they have.
Mhm. But I'd love to see. I would have loved to have seen Sam and Dean explore those other chapter houses or the Winchesters. That could have been good for another whole season.
Oh
Is
yeah.
you know cleaning up the mess that the men of letters left at their other chapter houses. Did they all have alien gods chained?
I liked the entrance they had
Mm-hmm.
to the chapter house in the Winchesters.
Mm-hmm.
That it was basically a manhole.
Mm-hmm.
That was very cool that it was a subterranean one.
Well, really, the one with Sam and Dean turns out to be subterranean by the time they get down all those steps.
Yeah, but it has kind of a normal door.
Yeah, especially if you're from one of the older cities in the Northeast. I've driven past things like that and always assumed they went down into, the city plumbing.
that could have been a whole spin-off, was exploring the men of letters chapter houses.
Hmm.
It would have been so cool. And then that whole thing of the history of how they cleaned up the so-called cleanup of England, and why there are no monsters there. And are there really, or are the monsters just hiding and aren't, are pretending that they got rid of all of them?
Hmm.
They've like warded the place, but did the monsters knock out some of the wards and just didn't mention that they aren't working?
Well, or did the wards get rid of the low-level monsters that were more creature, but the higher level monsters, the vampires, the other ones that can pass for human under certain conditions, they just faded into the woodwork.
I find myself thinking that they let the men of letters, the British men of letters, think they did this great thing,
Hmm.
and they threw them a few of the less powerful monsters and let
Hmm.
them look like they'd been captured by the wards. And the powerful monsters said, like you said, they hid, or they hid among us.
Well, and honestly, that would have been using the British men of letters to do their dirty work because those lower level monsters, the more creature type, they're the kind that attract attention. The mundanes stumble across them. They leave bodies in their wake.
The
That causes
stupid
problems.
werewolves.
Right. Or gnomes or other supernatural creatures that aren't higher level. So yeah, get rid of them. And then the more advanced ones that can pass for human,
Ones with self-control.
yes. Um, they don't have to be worried about being revealed by, these creatures that they probably have a great deal of disdain for as being, you know, subpar.
Because there was an episode or two of about either vampires or werewolves where someone went rogue and started making more,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a bit about, we don't do that. We watch how many we're making and we keep the numbers down so that the hunters don't come after us.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they were having those problems and they let the British men of letters take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because in vampires and werewolves, the older they get, the more powerful they are.
Yeah. And
In every mythology,
right.
with age comes strength.
Well, and it just makes sense to limit the number because otherwise you get turf wars and you get power struggles.
Well, then you end up fighting over the food supply.
Mm-hmm.
In the British Isles are islands. If you want to live there and not end up starving, you've got to keep the numbers down. There's only so many people that you can drink from. And it's not like there are great herds of cattle bouncing around that you can, draw blood from.
Were cows. Although there are a fair amount of sheep.
There are sheep. It's like the island of Malta. You don't see a lot of cows there. They have great herds of rabbits.
They're harder to catch.
Well, the rabbits are they raise them. That's a delicacy there
Mm-hmm.
because it's just not a big enough island for herds of cows.
There
But
was,
they can raise rabbits. They're much smaller.
there was a movie, I swear, where the vampires ended up drinking from the cows and they ended up turning the cows. And at the end, there are these cow vampires.
Oh, oh.
Probably back in the 80s.
No, Paolo wrote a book about zombie cows, a middle grade book that is hysterical. Zombie baseball cows. I cannot remember the exact title. Paolo Bacca, I cannot remember how to pronounce his last name. I'm going to be very embarrassed by this later. because he's a Hugo and Nebula award-winning author, and he's a wonderful guy, but I can't pronounce his last name. But boy, did I enjoy that book.
The movie was The Little Vampire, and they did
Oh,
have vampire cows.
I have the little vampire too. I have the book.
Hmm.
There's a series of them. They're delightful.
Yeah,
I have many vampire things. I went through a vampire phase.
didn't we all? Yes. Well, I think of the Men of Letters, and then I think of some of the secret societies in real life. And, some of those, like the Freemasons, have been rumored to be around for a couple thousand years, and are credited, at least in mythology and legend, for having their fair amount of ability with arcane things and magic and rituals. Now, my grandfather was a Mason, and I don't really see him in a robe doing magic, but maybe I didn't really know the man. Um,
Hey, I belonged to one of the I was a triangle girl, but I never made it to the Eastern Star because I moved. My mother was a star. My dad is Mason.
my grandmother was an Eastern Star. My mom was an Eastern Star, but isn't the girls group Rebecca's and the boys were DMLA's?
There's two girls groups. There's the rainbow and the triangle.
Rainbow Girls,
Trust me, and the boys group is the Demolay.
the DMLA.
Yep.
But, I think about that.
They're service organizations.
Right.
I used to work at, the dinners and stuff where, we're girls. We got to get all dressed up so that we could serve people.
Well, see, that's what they want you to believe, but actually, in their secret chapter houses, they're keeping the world safe from
We we
supernatural
did
threats.
have we did have buildings. I mean, there are Masonic lodges everywhere. And
Mm-hmm.
we had a meeting, you know, standard dress for a meeting is a long gown
Mm-hmm.
and gloves to your elbows. At least, back when I was under 18.
Yeah. So it's interesting because when you think about the Men of Letters being a secret society, and you think of all the real secret societies that have, or quasi-secret societies, um, the Men of Letters didn't get as long a run as some of them.
I love what they did with the Men of Letters, and as a writer, I
Mm-hmm.
really appreciate when they brought them into the series
Mm-hmm.
and the place that they served.
Mm-hmm.
Because frankly, the whole staying in weird motels or staying in the car or
Mm-hmm.
staying in houses where, broken down houses was getting old. And
Well,
they needed a home base. And the bunker really,
mm-hmm.
when they discovered the bunker in season 8,
Mm-hmm.
it refreshes the show so much and gives them a place to call home.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole new jumping off point for the series.
Well, and Sam and Dean weren't getting any younger, so sleeping on those crappy motel beds was bad for the back.
Oh yeah. Well, it's one of the turning
Mm-hmm.
points.
I agree.
There's the one turning point is the beginning of season 4 where Castiel shows up and they introduce the angels, dicks that they are.
Mm-hmm.
Them getting the bunker and discovering the Men of Letters is another big one. But there's a couple of major points that just change everything, you know? And I was reborn and that changed everything. It's a
Mm-hmm.
huge thing.
Well, I keep thinking about Dauphine and the submarine and the Hand of God. So there were British men of letters. She was French.
She was from one of the European groups
Right. So
working during the war. She
so
was
that
part of the resistance.
and so that makes me wonder what happened to the German men of letters. Were they resistance or did they collaborate?
Um, I don't know. I do know that there was the guy with the golem,
Mm-hmm.
he was also at least associated with the men of letters or was part of a parallel group, his grandfather.
Oh, Adam.
I'm not great with names. Not the guy who ended up with the golem, but his grandfather, the rabbi,
Mm-hmm.
the one who got burned up.
Yes.
He was part of a group from World War II.
It looks like so Aaron Bass, that was in the episode Everybody Hates Hitler. And Aaron Bass was the son of the rabbi. And from the name of the
Was he
town,
the son or the grandson?
oh, that's a good question. Let me check. But the name of the town looks Russian, or more Russian than German.
I thought they had that golem running around in Germany, but it could be Russia. The very beginning of the episode.
Well, the name of the town, it's talking about the ghetto of Vitsibsk. Anytime there's a sk on the end of something, I think Russian, but I could be
Well,
wrong.
that could be Poland too. I don't know.
True. Um,
But he was fighting against the bad guys, and it was a parallel group
Cthulhu.
associated with the Jewish element.
Well, you had the Judah Initiative, which constructed the
Right.
Golem, and then you had the Thule, which were
The bad
the
guys.
bad guys.
Right. The Judah Initiative was another parallel group that were working with the Men of Letters. That
Mm-hmm.
was the name I couldn't remember. They were like another similar group that definitely worked with the Men of Letters.
Aaron Bass was the grandson of the rabbi that created the Golem.
If only he'd hung on to the instruction book
Yeah.
instead of smoking it. We all make mistakes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he was under a lot of pressure. And um, but yeah,
I always found that particularly entertaining. But yeah, if there was the Judah Initiative, which was clearly another group that was using magic and doing similar things, that was allied with the Men of Letters,
mhm,
then she belonged to a French group that either was
mhm,
the Men of Letters or was allied with them.
mhm.
And there had to be all sorts of stuff like that through Europe.
Yeah, one would think so. Um, See, I would love to see.
If
uh,
only we'd had 5 or 10 more seasons so they could build on the whole Men of Letters thing.
Yes,
Or, you
I'm
know,
actually surprised that nobody has done a deep dive into that, even in supernatural fan fiction.
well,
But as far as I can tell, they didn't. Hmm?
things I've discovered that I didn't know about is there's Law and Order. Like there's Law and Order in London and
Mm-hmm.
there's Law and Order in Toronto that we don't get.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there should have been a supernatural Europe, clearly,
Well,
to parallel this.
we
You know,
already had supernatural Vancouver pretending to be the United
well,
States.
but there should have been a
Yeah,
spin-off or a Men of Letters spin-off.
yeah, that would have been fun. Well, believe it or not, we have managed to go through our time. So this was fun. I've got all kinds of new ideas. Fanfic writers out there, if you're listening, we gave you a lot of material to work with. We expect you to deliver. So many great ideas. Now, if they just come back and see
And
what
turn Vancouver into all of Europe.
that's right. And Jensen and Jared keep saying it's not over yet. They want to come back. Here's a golden idea. Go hunt down those men of letters.
They're
Well,
just so
Elektra,
busy.
yeah. Hey, thank you so much for doing this tonight. And tell us what new, recent, or upcoming book and where to find you online.
Well, I'm Elektra Hammond. You can find me at untilmidnight.com. I do most of my socials on Mastodon. where I am Elektra at wandering.shop, and join us on Monday nights at 7, where we use the hashtag WriteFant, and somebody proposes four questions on a random topic, and everybody is welcome to join in and answer them so we can have a lively discussion about something.
Sounds like fun. I'm Gail C. Martin, and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write male paranormal romance. And if you spell my names right, you will find me on all the major social media. I've got a new book coming out as Morgan in the Witchbane series, Cursed, and got a new book coming out in the Joe Max series, co-authored with my husband Larry and Martin. That is Times Change. So thank you so much. This was so much fun. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more Supernatural coming up soon, so we'll see you online.